The prairie night stretched wide and unbroken, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow even the stars. Coyotes howled somewhere beyond the ridgeline, their cries carrying sharp against the wind. In the distance, the glow of a dying campfire flickered low, a thin breath of smoke winding upward like a spirit leaving the earth. By that fire sat a woman. Her figure was still, almost statue-like, except for the faint trembling of her shoulders. Her dress was torn, the hem blackened with soot, her boots scuffed raw from miles of hard ground. She wasn't watching the flames so much as she was staring through them, eyes fixed, empty, as though her soul had wandered someplace far from her body. Every crackle of the wood was a memory returning, men's voices shouting, the slam of fists, the rush of fire catching dry timber. She had fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and the echo of laughter still chasing her through the night. She had stopped here only because her legs refused to carry her farther. The shadows behind her shifted. At first she thought it was just the wind dragging branches across the dirt, but then came the slow, heavy tread of boots. She stiffened, her hands curling against her knees. She had nothing to defend herself with, no knife, no gun, not even the strength to stand. Her heart thudded hard, fear catching in her throat. Out of the dark, a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, dust clinging to his coat. A cowboy's hat shadowed his face until he drew closer to the circle of firelight. The glow caught the edge of his jaw, his eyes sharp and searching, but not cruel. He stopped a few feet away, not moving any nearer, as if careful not to spook a wild creature. For a long breath, neither of them spoke. Only the fire filled the silence, hissing low as it ate through its last pieces of wood. Finally, his voice broke the night. Deep, even, Kara, rhying a kind of steadiness she hadn't heard in months. "You look like you've been running a long time," he said. She blinked, her throat tight, words caught somewhere she couldn't reach. All she could do was stare, her eyes wide in the flickering light. He nodded once, as though her silence told him enough. Slowly, he crouched down across from her, on the other side of the fire. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to share the glow. "Name's Cole," he offered quietly. "Ranch out west, 2 valleys over. Don't mean you no harm, just saw the smoke." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her voice had been burned out of her by the night. She only looked at him, the fire painting her face in shades of exhaustion and ash. Cole leaned forward, pulled a strip of dried meat from his saddlebag, and laid it on the ground between them, not forcing it into her hands, just setting it there, an offering before sitting back again. For the first time, her eyes moved from the flames. They flickered to the food, then back to the stranger across the fire. Something fragile sparked in her chest, a question, maybe even hope, but it was too early to name. The prairie was wide, the night was long, but the fire had not yet gone out. The fire crackled low, its glow painting the dust in amber light. She hadn't touched the strip of meat he'd left between them. Her hands stayed tight in her lap, fingers clenched white, like a bird afraid to leave its nest. Cole didn't push. He leaned back against his saddle, arms folded across his chest, eyes fixed not on her but on the horizon where the dark pressed in close. He'd learned long ago that a spooked horse won't come near the hand that grabs. Sometimes you had to wait. The silence stretched, broken only by the occasional snap of wood in the fire. Coyotes sang again, farther away now, but their song still carried the chill of loneliness. At last she shifted. Just a small movement, her head turning slightly, her gaze flicking toward him, her lips parted as if to speak, but all that came was a hoarse whisper, barely there. Why'd you stop?" Cole lifted his head. He hadn't expected her voice, soft, cracked, but steady enough to cut the night. He didn't rush his answer. "Same reason a man reins his horse when he sees someone lying in the road," he said simply. "Wouldn't sit right to ride on." Her eyes lingered on him across the fire, searching as though trying to catch a lie in his face. But there was nothing there, just calm, plain truth. Her throat bobbed. Then she looked down at the food between them. Her hand moved slow and uncertain before she picked it up. She didn't eat it once, only held it, turning it in her fingers like it might vanish. Cole allowed himself a small nod. Good. You'll need it. Trail takes more out of you than you think. She glanced back up, a flicker of defiance in her tired eyes. You don't know where I've been. You're right, he said, leaning forward slightly, his gaze steady. But I know you ain't safe if you keep on alone. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, but the weight of her exhaustion pressed too heavy. For a moment the firelight caught her expression. Fear, pride, and something else buried deeper. She tore off a piece of the meat and chewed slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Cole adjusted his hat, looked down at the fire, and poked it with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. He spoke again, softer now. Storm's coming by morning. Wind smells like snow. You'll freeze if you stay out here. The words hung heavy in the air. Her eyes drifted toward the sky, where clouds had begun to crawl over the stars, thick and grey. She knew he wasn't lying. Her voice, when it came again, was quieter than before. I can't go back. Cole's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Not yet. He just nodded once. Then we ride forward, he said. But we ride together. The fire hissed low, and for the first time, she didn't look away, fool. Rom him. The wind shifted in the night, and with it came the bite of winter. Cole had been right. The storm was rolling in from the north. He rose before dawn, brushing frost from his coat, and found her still curled by the fire, her face pale beneath the soot that clung to her skin. She stirred as he poured water from his canteen into the tin cup, the steam from its faint warmth rising in the cold air. Her eyes blinked open, wary at first, then settling when she saw him. Morning, he said, handing her the cup. His tone was steady, quiet, as if he didn't want to spook her back into silence. She hesitated, then took it, her hands shaking. She sipped, coughed, and whispered, You weren't lying. The snow's close. Cole nodded toward the horizon. Already the sky wore a dull grey coat, heavy with what was coming. Ain't but a few hours till it hits. We'll need shelter. Her gaze flicked toward his horse, saddled and ready. You expect me to ride with you? Don't expect anything, he said, buckling the strap on his bedroll. But you'll freeze if you don't. She clenched her jaw, eyes hard with defiance. You don't know who's looking for me. Cole straightened. That was the first real crack in the wall she'd built. He watched her carefully, his voice low but edged. Then it ain't the cold that'll kill you. It's them. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Instead, her gaze darted toward the tree line as if shadows might step out any moment. Cole's eyes followed hers. The forest was quiet, too quiet for his liking. He adjusted his hat and crouched near the fire, smothering it with dirt until only smoke curled up into the pale sky. You got a name? He asked without looking at her. She drew in a breath, held it, then let it out slow. Clara. Cole nodded once. All right, Clara. Let's ride before the storm and before whoever's out there finds your trail. She looked at him sharply. You believe me? He swung into the saddle, extended a calloused hand down toward her. Don't matter what I believe. What matters is staying alive. For a heartbeat, she stood. She stood frozen in the cold morning, torn between pride and survival. Then her hand slipped into his, small and trembling. He pulled her up onto the horse behind him, the weight of her settling against his back. The horse snorted, pawed the ground, and Cole urged it forward. As they moved into the trees, Clara glanced over her shoulder. Far back along the ridge, a shape shifted, dark against the snowless ground. Watching, waiting. She gripped Cole's coat tighter. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. The snow began as a whisper, thin flakes swirling through the bare branches, catching in Clara's hair. By the time the sun had climbed higher, the storm had teeth. Wind drove the snow sideways, stinging their faces, and the world shrank to a blur of white and shadows. Cole leaned low over the saddle, urging the horse on. Clara clung to him, her breath hot against his back, though he could feel the shiver running through her body. "Hold tight," he shouted over the wind. "We'll find a line shack. There's one out this way, if it's still standing." She buried her face against his coat, but whispered, voice nearly lost to the storm, "They won't stop." Cole's jaw tightened. "Who?" "The men," she said, trembling. "They'll follow no matter what. They want me dead." The words cut through the howling wind sharper than ice. He didn't press her. Questions could wait. Survival couldn't. The horse stumbled in a drift, and Cole pulled it steady, guiding it along the ridge. He knew these mountains better than most. Every hollow, every broken fence line. If they could just reach the cabin, they'd have a chance. But as he glanced back through the swirling snow, his gut turned cold. Through the white haze, faint shapes flickered. Riders, dark against the storm, too far to make out, but moving, following. He cursed under his breath. Clara must have seen it too, because she gripped him tighter, her voice breaking. "You see them, don't you?" "Yeah," he muttered. "I see 'em." They pressed on, the horse laboring through knee-deep drifts. Finally, through the wall of snow, the outline of a structure emerged, tilted, half-buried, but standing. The line shack. Cole swung down, nearly dragging Clara with him as they fought the wind to reach the door. It groaned on its hinges, snow spilling inside as he forced it open. The shack was dark, smelling of old wood and mice, but it was shelter. He shoved the door closed, dropped the bar across it, and struck a match. The flame wavered, caught, and the small stove in the corner sputtered to life. Clara collapsed onto the floor, clutching her arms around herself. Her lips were blue, her eyes wide with fear, not just of the storm, but of whatever shadows trailed them. Cole knelt, fed wood into the stove, then turned to her. "You need to tell me what they want, Clara. Why they're hunting you." She stared at him, firelight flickering in her eyes. Finally her voice cracked, low and raw. "Because I saw what I wasn't supposed to, and I lived." The storm howled outside, rattling the shack walls. But it wasn't the wind that made Cole's hand go to his revolver. It was the truth in her words, heavy as a death sentence. The storm raged on into the night, but the riders never turned back. Cole knew it deep down. Men like that didn't quit, not with blood in their eyes and money pushing them forward. Inside the shack, the fire hissed and spat, but it wasn't enough to chase away the weight in the air. Clara sat close to the stove, her thin frame wrapped in Cole's spare blanket. She stared into the flames, as if the answers to her fate lived there. Cole cleaned his revolver at the small table, his movements steady, deliberate. He wasn't a man who liked talking much, but silence now felt like a trap. "You said you saw something," he finally said, his voice even but edged with steel. "Something that made 'em want you gone." Clara lifted her eyes to him. They were wet with the kind of fear a person carried too long, but behind it was fire. "It was at the Harmon Ranch," she whispered. "I wasn't meant to be there that night, but I was. I saw them drag him out, Mr. Harmon. They—" her voice cracked. "They didn't just kill him. They made it slow. And then they set the barn alight." Cole stilled, the rag frozen in his hand. "Cattle thieves?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Worse. Men that wear badges in the day and masks at night." The words landed heavy. Cole had heard rumors, lawmen running their own brand of justice, lining their pockets, covering their tracks with fire and fear. But hearing it in her voice, seeing the way her hands trembled, it made the truth solid. "They saw me," she continued, her voice breaking. "I ran, but not fast enough. One of them, he caught my hair, yanked me down in the dirt. He would have finished it if I hadn't clawed his face. I left him bleeding, but—" She drew in a ragged breath. "He saw me. He knows." The shack groaned in the storm's fury, but another sound cut through, a creak outside, deliberate, heavy boots crunching snow. Cole was on his feet before Clara could move, revolver drawn. His eyes met hers, calm but fierce. "They found us!" Her face drained of color, but she didn't scream. She only whispered, "Then this is where it ends." Cole's jaw tightened. He moved to the window, lifting a corner of the frost-crusted cloth. Lanterns bobbed in the white darkness. 3, maybe 4 riders, circling slow. "They ain't gonna wait for morning," Cole muttered. "They'll come fast. Dirty." Clara pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her teeth chattering not just from cold now, but from dread. "You don't have to stay. You could slip out the back, ride south." But Cole cut her off with a look, sharp enough to stop her words. "You think I'd leave you to 'em?" He shook his head, lowering his voice to a low growl. "I've seen wolves circle before. Only way out is to break 'em, one by one." The firelight caught the steel of his revolver as he checked the chambers. His other hand reached for the rifle leaning in the corner. Outside, the storm screamed, but beneath it was the steady crunch of boots and the faint jingle of spurs. The riders were closing in. Cole positioned himself by the door, his eyes burning with the calm of a man who had stood at the edge before and didn't flinch. "Stay low," he told Clara. "And when that door gives, don't look away." The bar across the door rattled. Then a fist pounded hard enough to shake the walls. And in the small, flickering light of the fire, Clara realized the truth. Cole wasn't just willing to fight for her. He was ready to kill for her. The pounding on the door came again, harder, meaner. Snow drifted through the cracks of the frame, scattering in the firelight. A voice followed, muffled but sharp enough to pierce the storm. "Clara!" The man's drawl dragged her name out like a curse. "We know you're in there. Ain't no use hiding. Come out now, and maybe we let you breathe an other hour." Clara stiffened where she crouched beside the stove. That voice, she knew it. Sheriff Mallory. The scar she had left across his cheek must still burn when he spoke. Cole kept his place, by the door, rifle resting against his shoulder, eyes cold and unblinking. He tilted his head just enough toward her. "Sheriff, huh?" She nodded, her face pale. "He's the one I clawed, the one I—" Her voice broke. "He'll kill me slow." Another laugh rolled from outside, ugly as rust. "Open the door, girl, or we'll burn that shack down with you inside. Ain't nothing but kindling in this storm." Cole's jaw tightened. He looked around the shack. Thin walls, a roof that sagged, fire popping low in the stove. They were right. One torch and the place would go up like tinder. He lowered his voice, steady as a prayer. "When the first one comes through, I'll take him. Stay behind the stove. Don't move." Clara swallowed hard but nodded. She pulled the blanket tighter and pressed herself into the shadows. Her breath came shallow, eyes locked on the door. The pounding stopped. Silence pressed in heavy. Then the scrape of boots in the snow, retreating. Cole frowned. "They're setting fire." He didn't wait. In one swift motion, he shoved the bar off the door and threw it wide open, stepping into the storm with his rifle raised. The world outside was white fury, snow whipping sideways, lanterns swaying in the fists of mounted men. 3 shadows loomed in the blur, one on foot with a torch, flame spitting against the wind. Cole fired. The crack split the storm, and the torchbearer crumpled into the snow, fire dying in the drift. The riders shouted, pistols flashing, bullets punched into the shack walls, splinters flying. Clara covered her head and cried out. Cole moved like a man born for it, rifle barking once, twice, dropping one horseman into the snow. Another wheeled around, charging in fury, revolver blasting. Cole ducked back into the doorway, reloading smooth and fast. "Stay down," he barked to Clara. She nodded, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Through the roar of the storm and the gunfire, she could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears. The sheriff's voice cut through again, closer this time, guttural with rage. "You're dead, Cole. Dead for sticking your nose where it don't belong." Cole stepped back out, rifle braced. Snow stung his face, but his eyes never wavered. "Funny," he muttered under his breath. "I was thinking the same about you." The storm swallowed the rest in thunderous gunfire, steel and fury clashing in the heart of the blizzard. The snow swirled so thick, Clara could barely see past the doorway, only shadows lunging against the white. The crack of rifles and pistols shook the air, each report ringing through her chest like a hammer. She clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders, rocking against the stove's iron side. Smoke curled faintly from its seams, the fire within dimming under neglect. A shiver raced up her spine that had nothing to do with the storm. Through the haze, Cole's figure cut sharp and unyielding. He moved with a calm she could not fathom, stepping forward as bullets snapped past him, his rifle steady as though he were hunting deer instead of facing men hungry for blood. "Cole!" she cried, her voice strangled in the roar of wind. He didn't turn, didn't falter. The second rider broke from the storm, charging low, revolver flashing fire. Cole's shot caught him clean, pitching him sideways from the saddle into the snow. The horse screamed and bolted into the dark. But the sheriff, he was still there. Clara saw his shadow emerge from the storm, wide-shouldered and terrible, shotgun gleaming in his grip. "You should have stayed out of this, mountain man," Mallory bellowed, voice rattling the night. Cole braced himself in the doorway, empty rifles slung aside, revolver drawn. His breath came hard, pluming white, but his stance was firm. Clara's stomach knotted. Her eyes darted to the stove, iron poker leaning against it, sharp and blackened from years of fire. Her trembling hand reached for it. The sheriff's shotgun roared, the blast throwing sparks off the shack's doorframe. Clara screamed. Cole staggered back, coat torn, but somehow stayed on his feet. Mallory laughed, mean and hollow. "One more and you're down." He thumbed another shell into the chamber. Something broke in Clara then. She wasn't just a frightened girl in the shadows anymore. The months of running, the nights of terror, the scars still fresh on her skin, they all roared up inside her like a second storm. She stepped out from behind the stove, poker gripped white-knuckled in her hands. "Mallory!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the blizzard. The sheriff's head jerked toward her, his sneer curling wider. "There you are, little rabbit." That was all Cole needed. His revolver cracked once. The sheriff staggered, shotgun slipping from his hands into the snow. Clara dropped the poker, chest heaving, tears hot on her cheeks, though the cold cut like knives. Cole strode forward, revolver still raised, until he stood over Mallory's crumpled form. For a long, breathless moment, the storm was the only sound. Then Cole holstered the gun, bent, and picked up the shotgun before tossing it into the drift. He turned to Clara. His voice was low, rough. "It's over." But Clara could see the blood spreading dark across his sleeve where the pellets had caught him. She shook her head, stumbling toward him. "No, Cole, it's not over. Not if you bleed out here." He caught her before she fell, his big hands steady on her shoulders. His eyes met hers, steel softening to something she had never seen before. "Then I reckon you better keep me alive." And with the fire inside dwindling and the storm still raging, Clara realized the night had only just begun. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing the night's fury on the other side. The cabin shook with the storm, But inside, it was only the sound of Clara's hurried breaths and the crackle of a fire she was coaxing back to life. See, Cole slumped onto the cot, his face pale against the dim glow. The wound on his arm bled steady, darkening the fabric of his shirt. He pressed his hand to it, but didn't complain, his jaw set hard, eyes half-lidded, as if he was determined to stay upright no matter the cost. "Don't you dare close your eyes," Clara whispered, fumbling with the tin basin by the stove. Her hand shook as she poured melted snow into it, the steam rising in thin curls. Cole cracked a faint smile, though it came and went like a ghost. "Bossy, ain't you?" "Better bossy than burying you," she shot back, her voice breaking at the edges. She tore strips from her own skirt, fingers working fast, the fabric frayed, threads catching against her raw skin, but she kept going. She pressed the hot water-soaked cloth to his arm, the hiss of pain that escaped his throat cutting through her like a blade. He clenched his jaw tighter, eyes burning as he stared at her. "You shouldn't have stepped out there, Clara." She froze, the cloth heavy in her hands. "What was I supposed to do? Watch him kill you? Watch him drag me back?" Her words hung thick between them, louder than the storm outside. For a long moment Cole didn't answer. Then he let out a slow breath, one that carried the weight of years alone, years of silence in these mountains. "I ain't had someone stand beside me in a long time," he said finally, voice low, rough as gravel. "You did tonight. I won't forget that." Her throat tightened. She looked down at the wound, at the strong arm that had carried her when she couldn't walk, that had fired the shot that ended her nightmare. Her hands steadied. She tied the bandage firm, her fingers brushing his skin. He winced, but his hand came up, large and calloused, resting lightly over hers, not stopping her, just there. The fire began to take, flames licking higher in the stove, painting the wall with a warm, flickering glow. The little cabin, battered by the storm, became a small island of light in the endless dark. Clara sat back at last, exhausted, her hands red and trembling. Cole leaned against the wall, eyes closing just for a moment. But when they opened again, they found hers, steady and unflinching. "You're safe now," he said. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she believed it.